voices are needed. Become the pulse of the revolution. In the ranks of the masses rising. Get up, your voices are needed. Become the pulse of the revolution. In the ranks of the masses rising.
Greetings, everyone. This is a call to actions. And today, we have a very special podcast for you today. Probably a lot of you that listen to a call to actions have been waiting specifically for this one. This is podcast number 77 already. And we're going to kind of take a step back into some of our earlier interests. Though one of my main focuses of the day, though, I've kind of stayed a little quiet and underground when it comes to this specific topic. The topic is the Honeywell Uranium Hexafluoride Conversion Facility in Metropolis, Illinois. It's the only uranium hexafluoride conversion plant in the United States and the largest of its type on Earth. Special guests here today. We have Kevin Thompson. He's the lead counsel, or the main dude or main lawyer in charge of the class action lawsuit against the Honeywell Metropolis Uranium Conversion Plant in Metropolis, Illinois. He's with Thompson Barney Law. He's an environmental lawyer, entrepreneur, and inventor who has been involved in high-stakes litigation across the country for more than 20 years. As a litigation consultant, he has managed evidence in tobacco cases, patent cases, and environmental cases worth billions of dollars. And he has continually developed innovative technologies designed to organize and present evidence. Thompson has served as an adjunct professor of advocacy at LSU Law School and a NETA faculty member. He received his JD from Tulane Law School after obtaining a degree in broadcast journalism from Marshall University. So let's welcome Kevin Thompson to a call to actions. It's great to catch up with you and get this information flowing. How are you?
Pretty good. Great to see you again, Bobby.
All right, you too. So let's see. The lawsuit that you're involved in, it's very personal to me, and I believe it'll be for a lot of our listeners. I believe we have a lot of listeners in the Metropolis, Illinois, and Paducah, Kentucky area. The Honeywell facility, it didn't start out with the name Honeywell or Honeywell Metropolis. It began as a uranium hexafluoride conversion facility back during the Cold War, back in 1958, though. Would you like to give us just a brief background on the history of the plant that made you interested in pursuing a class action lawsuit against the facility?
Well, the facility was built, as you said, in 1958 and went into operation in support of our weapons complex in the Cold War. And then it began as the nuclear energy industry grew. It transitioned from providing just nothing but material in support of the weapons complex to primarily providing feedstock for the enrichment of uranium to be used in nuclear energy production. And basically what they do is they take yellowcake or ore concentrate from all around the world: Congo, Namibia, Kazakhstan, Russia, Utah, Canada, and they convert it into a gas, uranium hexafluoride. Then that gas is shipped in gigantic cylinders that look like giant beer kegs. And these beer kegs are shipped to enrichment plants around the world and very close to the Metropolis plant. Most of them probably went right across the river to Paducah. In the enrichment process, the uranium hexafluoride, which when it leaves Metropolis has total uranium in it, 234, 235, 236, 238. And then the 238 in the enrichment process is basically separated from the 235, which is what makes the fission in fission. It's more easily split. It's more active, and that's what bombs and fuel rods are made out of. The Metropolis facility produces the purest uranium hexafluoride in the world, and it's important to the whole world. I mean, even Russia uses the uranium hexafluoride from the Metropolis plant. At least they did before the Ukrainian war. The 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 importance of it in the world fuel cycle, and this is a fuel cycle facility. The importance in the fuel cycle is the purity of the Metropolis product allows less pure uranium hexafluoride with more impurities from uh, conversion plants in Canada, uh, France, England, Russia, China, Kazakhstan. Those uranium hexafluoride plants, their product is really has too many impurities to run through your typical enrichment facility and stay within their emission limits. So I can't stress for enough the importance of the Metropolis facility to the worldwide nuclear fuel cycle.
It's pretty much a go-to facility for the world because due to its unique characteristics, it does have a unique process as compared to other conversion sites. What is it? What's it called? A dry fluorination process. Is that correct?
This is the fluid volatility. I think the dry is the other one. I could be mistaken. It's the difference with this one is the distillation unit on the back side of the process, and that's what makes it unique. That's the trade secret, like along with a few others. That's the trade secret there at the plant, and no one on Earth has been able to come close to anything with this purity.
And in order to process so much uranium, convert it, and meet the requirements of the customers, especially on time restrictions, the plant had to routinely excrete, discharge, emit radioactive compounds in the form of different states, liquid, intentional liquid discharges, air emissions, um, even burial sites. I know of a mound out around the outskirts of the fence line. A mound. You could look at it on a lidar map and actually see this mound. It's a little southeast of the actual fence line. The mound is. Though, what made you want to get involved as a lawyer? Now, what was troubling to you? Were it the intentional environmental discharges and the contamination of the workers and people?
Well, my mentor, Stuart Smith, who's passed away, someone in Metropolis contacted him and said there's a problem here. And he contacted Gary Vanderbo, lives across the river, and he represents and protects workers. And Stuart learned initially about the plant and the excess cancer rates that I think people in Metropolis felt existed. We've since looked at the records and show that there really are excess cancer rates. And I think that's where, most environmental cases, if they're going to be successful, they start with the people, not the emission. And so, we have a problem with cancer in Metropolis. There's a big uranium plant in the middle of town. So then we start getting into, how that plant works. The plant has normal emissions. They also have releases. The releases are important because they point to failures in the process. Sometimes they point to failures in honesty from Allied Chemical, Honeywell, or the NRC. Um, and I think that uh, the cancer, I believe, is not caused, and really the releases are like some of the other things in the case. They're fingerprints of activities. They're fingerprints of issues. But the real problem is simply the day-to-day emissions from the plant of daughter products. And we've got a lot of radium in the area. We've got a lot of thorium in the area. We've got a lot of radioactive lead and polonium, technetium. We found trace amounts of plutonium. So when you're talking about threats versus fingerprints, the plutonium is more of a threat. Of course, if you're going to be exposed to it, you know, it has a dose coefficient on the kind of in the range of radium, so it's very dangerous. But what the plutonium in the area shows is that the plant was processing materials they weren't licensed to process. This plant is meant to be pure, and it's meant only to have run of the mine natural uranium that comes right out of the earth, nothing irradiated, nothing that's been through the fuel cycle before. A lot of plants, run recycled material, but the goal of this plant was to make the purest UF6 on the planet. And to do that, the Atomic Energy Commission and the NRC licensed them only to handle natural uranium. So when you find plutonium or neptunium or something like that out in the community, in fuel cycle communities, then that shows that something not natural was processed in the plant. And there's a big public record of that.
There are a few public records of that. I believe it was in the 90s. I'm not going to speak on the exact dates, though it was plutonium contaminated uranium tetrafluoride or green salt that was processed from Fernald material. And they claimed some are claiming that the plant wasn't licensed to process Department of Energy material, though the Fernald green salt was allowed to be processed, and through the routine emissions from the plant was escaped. Somehow miraculously went past the fence line, as they don't like to admit. Though let's backtrack just a little bit. So during the Cold War, it was Allied signal. It was extremely important for the United States to have this facility, especially in the location that it is. It's a small little town located in the Shawnee Forest, with a great right on an artery where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi River. Though later on they changed their name as Allied and Honeywell merged as a corporation, but they thought Honeywell was a more attractive name. They continued to work with the Paducah gaseous diffusion plant and sending their material over to Paducah. Then here recently, I would say recently, as I'm 37, I'm no longer a teenager anymore. So just within the past 10 years, a lot of information started to come forward. A lot of people became interested, started really realizing, I think somewhere around 2014, that there was a big problem. You got involved, and see, what have you found? You have the law firm Thompson Barney, the firm of which your lead counsel, has found contamination. What kind of contamination have you found, and where?
Well, within 3 months, 95% of our samples that are impacted, and we defined impacted as twice background or containing transuranics, fall within 3 miles of the plant. The closer you are to the plant, the higher the concentration of these high levels. Um, so we found transuranics, which means things that are above uranium on the periodic scale and therefore are man-made. We found plutonium. We found fission products, cesium, americium, technetium, and we found the natural decay products of uranium that you would expect in the ore: radium, thorium, polonium, lead, bismuth, actinium, protactinium. Uh, these daughter products are far more radioactive than the more ubiquitous U-238, which takes over 1 billion years for half of it to decay. That's what a half-life is. So that's what we found. It's dangerous. Uh, Using the dose calculations that the EPA has promulgated and applying them to soil samples, we find numerous samples that exceed 25 millirems, which is the annual dose limit that a fuel cycle facility like Honeywell has to meet. Um, so, with that, what you've got is a town that has basically too much radiation, an obvious radiation source, and too much cancer. So, so I think the narrative is quite obvious.
And the class action lawsuit began or started in 2018. Um, can you speak on the information that you had in order to file the class action lawsuit in 2018, whatever you can legally talk about, and the overwhelming amount of information you found over the past 7 years up to today? Like what stoked you and what stokes you now?
Well, I think primarily always the independent environmental samples drive everything in an environmental case. And so the first thing we did was talk to people who were workers at the plant and simultaneously take soil and dust samples throughout the community. And then there were some publicly available documents that we were able to find from the NRC public database. And that's how we got the lawsuit started. As we have gone on, these cases involve document requests and depositions. We've done dozens of depositions. We've exchanged millions of pages of documents. We spent probably 8 weeks in the NRC library in Washington, D.C., looking at microfiche. And what we found was, I think that that you can point to the emission controls as that they installed in 1958, and they really haven't upgraded many of them at all. And see that the plant as designed has 55 stacks, emission release points. It also has a lot of fugitive stacks or fugitive release points, like in when it gets hot, they remove the side panels of the building, and then dust can flow out from there because they create a breeze through the window uh, and that runs through the plant. The plant leaks all over the place inside, and that dust gets carried outside. That's what we call a fugitive release. There's also releases just from the dust and the dirt. The front yard of the plant is extremely contaminated. The 2017 environmental report that supported the current license that runs till 2058. That environmental report done by a contractor, Intercon, notes that there's a disturbing increase in off-site uranium concentrations. That plant, that report and that license application puts the decommissioning cost at about $250 million, and I think that's really light if the plant were to be decommissioned. Uh, and yeah, I think they identify several feet uh, of topsoil and dirt and rock is going to have to be removed from the front yard of the plant as part of that decommissioning process because it's just inundated the soil there. Um,
You
so
care
with
if I
that,
touch on that topic right there, their front yard?
Mhm.
Not far from their front yard are houses that families live in, have lived in pretty much their whole life. To me, it was shocking once I started to understand what the plant was doing, what it was capable of, and what it was doing. How close, seeing how close the actual houses that these people live in comparison to um, the facility or the site boundary, is extremely close. There's a main highway right out front.
Right, 45. And so you look how close like your grandfather's house, and like you look at how close those houses are. But in the 80s, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, there were houses a lot closer, just right across the street.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I believe there were six or seven homes across the street. Um, the EPA and the NRC and the Atomic Energy Commission have always been at odds. Uh, the EPA is very limited in what they can do related to the plant. Um, from what we understand, there are no records that exist. They're gone. The only records that exist are about this whole incident is a report from the national labs at Los Alamos and a bunch of property records and then testimony. And what all of those show is that there was an investigation of the doses that would be received by the individuals living across the street from the plant in those homes. Uh, the Los Alamos National Labs asked the NRC staff to calculate based upon some environmental samples that I have to assume either the EPA or the National Labs collected from across the street, and they found that an infant living across the street in those homes would have sustained a 45 millirem or maybe a 42.5 millirem lung dose, target organ lung dose. That's the standard by which this facility has to adhere because it's a fuel cycle facility. Um, so what does that mean? Well, the limit is a 25 millirem. The Honeywell's position that they've taken is that 25 millirem is just silly. It's such a low dose, it should be stricken from the regulations. It can't hurt anyone. Now, that's not true. But they can't tell the truth about that because, if people knew the truth, then, not in my backyard would mean that we'd probably be speaking Russian today. But the truth is, any dose can kill you. It doesn't mean that there's no safe dose. It means that there is no dose at which the risk doesn't increase. Uh, and they find a 42.5 millirem dose. I mean, we've calculated doses in the hundreds and I think even in the low thousands throughout the area. Uh, and But let's talk about Honeywell's experts' defense here. They say 25 millirem is no big deal. It's got to be above 100 millirem total body dose, which would be many multiples of 25. Uh, and they're not four times. It's higher because of the way the numbers between a whole body dose and a target organ dose are defined. So there's a 42.5 millirem dose. Next thing we know, Honeywell buys all the houses across the street under the ALERA program, as low as reasonably achievable, which is a standard that nuclear facilities have to meet. Um, so I think this destroys every bit of credibility that Honeywell has in the community. Their argument is based on these doses. I've been in 5 trials that involved radiation doses, and never have I seen a jury buy the annual dose limit argument. Um, Instead, they look at things like background, like how much did you emit? How much is supposed to be there on Earth? Well, There's a lot more there than there's supposed to be on Earth. It presumably came from you. Uh, you're liable. That's how things should work. That's how things work in Missouri. That's how things work in Colorado. In Illinois, in the Seventh Circuit, things work a little different. We have to meet this dose. But in Metropolis, the area is polluted with radioactive dust, and it's dust. This isn't some kind of death ray that that leaves from the plant. I mean, there are death rays that leave from the plant. They're called gamma rays, but they're not death rays because you got to get a bunch of them and you got to be close. And the best way to limit exposure to gamma rays is to just simply walk away. But with the dust, you inhale it, you ingest it. It gets lodged in your colon where it can cause cancer. It gets lodged in your brain and it can cause brain cancer. It can get lodged on your bone surface and cause uh, blood cancers. Like it can go to the thyroid and cause lymphatic cancers. It can cause thyroid cancer. Um, so the type of radiation that is being emitted from the plant is really radiation that is emitted from tiny, tiny, tiny little dust particles that people will inhale and can stay in their bodies for the rest of their lives. And so that risk will continue.
Those dust particles are emitted again. If you could touch on this again, the the amount of leaks that are continuously occurring within the inside of the facility. I've never been inside. I really don't want to go inside the facility, but to anyone who has been inside and actually witnessed the amount of leaks and how much it's leaking, those leaking spots within the interior is where this dust is coming from. Is that correct? Or
Well, there are leaks within the plant, little pinhole leaks that drop dust. There are also emission systems that are not designed to capture everything. If an emission system captured everything, the plant would explode. Like under pressure, you can't. Like if we're going to have things like Coca-Cola and jet airplanes, nuclear power plants, we're going to have some emissions. Okay, so these emissions are from the process because remember what the plant does. It purifies uranium ore. So it removes the daughter products and any impurities, which would be daughter products, fission products, transuranics, and arsenic, lead, all the things that the planet Earth is made up of that come in that ore, right? Through heat and pressure and various acids, uh, simple washing and shaking, uh, these impurities are removed from the product, which is pure uranium. That's not to say that they don't lose some uranium. I know at one point they lost 4 pounds a day of uranium went out into the Ohio River in the liquid effluent stream that you discussed. So there's a great deal of this. I think like it's on the you know just the uranium alone is on the magnitude of something like 20 metric tons have been released through the stacks through allowable releases out into the community over the since the 70s, okay, when we started keeping track of this kind of stuff. So what is going on is just the designed nature of the plant releases this radioactive dust that then settles all over the area.
I see here. Wow. Talk about a toxic legacy there. We have about 5 more minutes left. I do certainly want to talk about some solutions going forward and the current status of the lawsuit.
Well, right now, the status of the lawsuit is that we filed lawsuits on behalf of the city, the county, the class, and victims. The class is made up of property owners and people who have lived there, like yourself. The class seeks money compensation for residential property owners. The class seeks medical monitoring, basically cancer screening and epidemiology for the community. And that's the most important thing we can get. The government case also seeks medical monitoring, but it also seeks abatement of a nuisance. One of the abatements we want is we want to upgrade the hospital. People can't get chemo in Metropolis. When the hospital had its 3 year required standard critical care access evaluation, one of the primary needs of the community was a chemo infusion center. Um, and that's not something you usually find in a small downstate Illinois hospital as being a critical care need they're not meeting. Uh, there's a lot of people who are not affluent in Metropolis and they find it hard to get rides. They don't drive, they have cancer, and they got to go 30, 40 minutes, to the nearest chemo infusion center. Some people go all the way to Nashville or St. Louis for it, with primary treatment being done by specialist oncologists in those places. But there's a lot of medical services for cancer patients that could be delivered right there in Massac County. And that's one of the things we're trying to get. And the other thing that we're trying to get is a is an air monitoring system owned and operated by the local governments, the city and the county. So the city and the county know what's being emitted. And right now, the air monitoring system is woefully deficient. What we need is real-time monitoring so people know exactly what's coming out and don't have to wait a week for some lab to analyze a filter taken from the air monitor. All right. We want real-time monitoring. We want monitoring for non-radionuclides like fluorine and the other things that might be emitted from the plant, like heavy metals. We also want to have real-time monitoring of not just gross radiation, but more importantly, to assess the real health risks, the isotopes involved. Is it radium or is it uranium-238? That's the difference between no cancer and deadly cancer. So what we are trying to do is to give the people of Metropolis the tools they need to limit their exposure and to give them every minute extra that we can find to give them in their fight against cancer. People are going to continue developing cancer. We can't represent all of them. We're not going to be around. I'm not going to be here 40 years from now. But what we can do is create a medical monitoring program, um, and upgrade the infrastructure, give the government the tools to monitor what's coming out of that plant. Because I think the heart of this is nobody trusts Honeywell and nobody trusts the NRC in Metropolis. If every local official has voted to sue the biggest employer in town, something's wrong.
Very well said there. Again, Kevin Thompson, the lead counsel, main lawyer working on the class action lawsuit against the Honeywell Metropolis uranium hexafluoride conversion facility, again located in the small town of Metropolis, Illinois. Hopefully this suit can come to a conclusion and a great settlement sometime very soon. Again, Kevin Thompson, I want to thank you for being on a call to actions and being brave enough to take on this endeavor that no one's ever taken on before. Thank you.
Well, thank you for shining light on this throughout your whole life. And that's the kind of citizen science that this country needs more now than ever. So thank you.